Now I'm sure that this is the comparison that most of you guys are waiting for. Realme P3 Ultra versus iQOO Neo10R. Now for this 25,000 rupee price tag, both these phones offer performance that's punching way above its weight. But are these just performance monsters or is there more to it? Let's find out in this detailed comparison. Alright, if you're here for the first time, I'm Ershad. This is Trakin Tech English, your destination for detailed, incisive gadget reviews. Let me start off by saying that when it comes to the design, the Realme P3 Ultra would be my winner. Why? Because both these phones are of course made entirely of plastic, but the good thing with the P3 Ultra is that it's slimmer than the iQOO Neo10R, it's lighter than the iQOO Neo10R, and has much more rounded corners, making it comfortable to hold and use. But I must say this, the glossy back on the P3 Ultra definitely makes it prone to slip out of your hands. Having said that, this particular color variant of the phone and the design is why I kinda love it. Of course, that design of the moon looks kinda tacky sometimes, but it can glow in the dark, guys. Nice party trick. But more importantly, I really like the accent color around the camera module itself. The copper color looks very fetching if you ask me, and I also like the fact that the power button is also accented. I do like accented power buttons. I've always liked it. The Pixel used to be one of my favorites. Now don't get me wrong, the Neo10R also looks good. Not in this colorway. The Moonlight Titanium is my favorite color, but the P3 Ultra is slightly better. Not just in design, but even in durability, I think the P3 Ultra has a bit of an edge because it uses Corning's Gorilla Glass 7i solution as opposed to short sensation UP that's used in the Neo10R. And the biggest advantage on the P3 Ultra, especially in terms of durability, is that it supports IP66, IP68 and IP69, which is definitely better than the IP65 on the iQOO Neo10R. Especially in a country like India where it rains a lot, IP68 rating is something that gives you a peace of mind. But yes, no points for guessing. Both these phones have a Type-C 2.0 port at the bottom. Type-C 3.1 would have been nice. And you also get an IR blaster at the top as well. So the next time you go to your dentist, you can switch off their TV. So overall, in terms of design and build, yeah, I picked the P3 Ultra. Now talking about the displays on these phones, you get a 6.83-inch quad curved panel on the P3 Ultra and a 6.78-inch flat panel on the iQOO Neo10R. Now both offer the same resolution, but iQOO definitely offers a higher refresh rate and way higher peak brightness as well compared to the P3 Ultra. Now the higher refresh rate on the iQOO Neo10R of course comes with caveats because the system runs at 120Hz. There are certain games that are supported at 144Hz. And like I said, you do get higher peak brightness when you're watching HDR content on the iQOO Neo10R. In fact, the HDR gradation has been done well, especially when you watch the same YouTube video on both the phones. That's not it. If you're somebody who likes watching content on OTT, then Netflix HDR support is available on iQOO, but not on Realme. Now, the visibility under direct sunlight is almost similar on both the phones. I mean, they're equally bright outdoors. That's also because they've got very similar high brightness mode metrics. And the good thing on both these phones is that you get a very high PWM dimming rating of 3840Hz, which is fantastic because with high refresh rate displays, low light flicker is a problem, and that will be sorted with this. Touch sampling rate is very similar on both the phones, and the touch response also feels identical. Now, of course, with respect to metrics, in the game mode, the Realme P3 Ultra offers a slightly higher touch sampling rate, but you know what, honestly, in real world, you won't be able to tell the difference. Now, both these phones also have a very good X-axis vibration motor inside, and the haptic feedback has been tuned well, but the P3 Ultra is slightly better and it's a little more tight and crisp thanks to O-haptics. Now moving on from the display hardware to the audio side of things, which is something that I care about a lot, you do get support for Bluetooth high-res codecs like LHDC and LDAC on the P3 Ultra. With the iQOO Neo10R, we only get support for LDAC, and that seems to be a pattern on many Vivo and iQOO phones lately. We also tested the stereo speakers on both these phones side by side, and we felt like the iQOO Neo10R had slightly better bass response and a slightly richer sound. Take a listen to it for yourself and let me know what you guys think. By the way, before I forget, you also do get optical in-display fingerprint scanners on both the phones. Very fast to unlock, no problem there. Alright, time to talk about the performance, which is the most important thing on both these phones. So the P3 Ultra comes with the Dimensity 8350. The Neo10R has Snapdragon 8s Gen 3. You get 8 or 12GB of LPDDR5X RAM type on both the phones. And with the P3 Ultra, both the 128GB and the 256GB variants come with UFS 3.1 storage. With the iQOO Neo10R, the 128GB comes with UFS 3.1, whereas the 256GB variants come with UFS 4.1 storage. Of course, those variants are more expensive and not available under 25,000 rupees. Now, when you look at synthetic benchmarks in Geekbench and in Antutu, the iQOO Neo10R beats the Realme P3 Ultra. Now, while the P3 Ultra has slightly better CPU stability, the iQOO Neo10R has higher jips, which means that it is pushing for more performance, and the difference between the two is not much. Now, we did test the read-write speeds between the two, but the variant that we have of the iQOO Neo10R, it has UFS 4.1 storage, therefore the read-write speed is better. The GPU stability on the P3 Ultra is definitely better than the Neo10R, but when it comes to GPU performance, once again the Neo10R beats the Realme P3 Ultra. The best loop score is better on the iQOO, and you also get better frame rates. In fact, the Neo10R also didn't cross 40 degrees, which is fantastic. I mean, the P3 Ultra also doesn't get too hot, but Neo10R keeps it cooler. You know, the Dimensity 8350 also supports ray tracing, and when we compared the two, they're almost identical in the ray tracing scores. But when you talk about real-world gaming performance, the iQOO Neo10R takes a little bit of a lead. Firstly, we get 120 FPS support on BGMI, which is 90 FPS on the P3 Ultra. And even in Genshin Impact, when we played the game for 30 minutes at highest graphics at 60 frames per second, the average frames per second was slightly higher on the Neo10R compared to the Realme P3 Ultra. But the good thing is the P3 Ultra touched only 36 degrees Celsius as opposed to 42 degrees Celsius on the Neo10R. I mean, 42 degrees is also fine. It didn't breach a 45 degree threshold, neither did it throttle. In fact, the 59.8 FPS that we got in Genshin Impact is the best we've gotten on any phone under 30,000 till date, which is fantastic. By the way, both these phones do not have any heating issues, and it's particularly impressive on the P3 Ultra because it's so slim, right? And despite that, you get like a 6,000 plus millimeter square vapor cooling chamber inside the P3 Ultra, which is also true for the iQOO Neo10R. You get a 6,000 plus millimeter square vapor cooling chamber. We also tested out Airtel and Jio on both these phones. You get excellent network reception and good call quality as well. Nothing to complain there. You also get support for as many 5G bands as you would need. You also do get support for Wi-Fi 6, Bluetooth 5.4 as well. But the one thing that both these phones don't have, and I'm really not happy about, is the fact that you do not get support for NFC. And considering tap payments are becoming so popular in India, it is a must. Realme iQOO, please take note. Alright, now time to talk about the batteries inside these phones. 6000 mAh inside the P3 Ultra, 6400 mAh inside the Neo10R, and the Neo10R is a battery monster. You can easily expect 10 to 11 hours of screen on time from the phone. So 2 days of battery life on moderate usage is easily possible. It's not like the P3 Ultra is bad. We got 8.5 hours to 9 hours with the P3 Ultra, but it doesn't beat the Neo10R. Now charging speeds are slightly faster on the Realme compared to iQOO, but yeah, I think when it comes to battery and performance overall, I think the Neo10R takes a bit of a lead compared to the P3 Ultra, but it's not too much to sort of worry about it because the P3 Ultra also does a very good job. Now generally most performance oriented phones don't have good cameras, but is that true for these phones? Well, before I talk about that, take a look at the camera specs on your screen and I'll get to the pictures after that. Now technically the P3 Ultra has a bigger 1x1.56 inch Sony IMX896 primary sensor compared to the Neo10R's 1x1.95 inch Sony IMX882 sensor. But when we shot pictures with both the phones at 100% crop, we noticed that the P3 Ultra has a tendency to over-sharpen the images, which is not the case with the iQOO, which is a good thing. And the same is true at 2x, where again the iQOO Neo10R looks better. In fact, because of its superior algorithm tuning, even the 5x and 10x shots look better on the iQOO Neo10R compared to the Realme P3 Ultra. And this is obviously digital zoom. Talking about the color sense tuning of both the phones, they're not close to natural at all, but I prefer the iQOO Neo10R here because what the iQOO does right is that it at least gets the color close to what our eyes saw, where the P3 Ultra sort of oversaturates to an extent where the colors don't look natural at all. They kind of look unnatural here. Yes, these images might look good for, direct social media upload, but it's a little too vibrant and punchy, so it won't give you too much room to sort of color correct, which could be an issue if you're trying to edit images. The HDR performance is very similar on both the phones across both the primary and the ultra-wide lenses. The iQOO Neo10R offers a very well-balanced and a more controlled HDR look, where the P3 Ultra offers better control over the shadow region. And one of the things that we've noticed with many mid-rangers is that if you're shooting people against the light, there is a lot of HDR bloom around the face. Both these phones don't have that problem, so well done. Now when you're looking at skin tones, the P3 Ultra tends to overexpose lighter skin tones while making the darker skin tones slightly reddish. Both do not have any accurate skin tone rendition, but between the two, I would pick the iQOO Neo10R. But one area where the iQOO Neo10R beats the P3 Ultra handily is definitely in portrait shots. Because the 2x portraits from the Neo10R actually have a good amount of details without looking like a digital crop, and the algorithm does very good semantic segmentation and portrait vocab blur, which definitely looks better than the Neo10R. Now both these phones also have the 8 megapixel ultra wide angle camera, but they're tuned really badly. I mean, both are bad at taking pictures. Now you do not get the amount of details. They look very soft in daylight, and even in low light, of course, Realme tends to over sharpen, iQOO's too soft. Yeah, I wouldn't pick either of them for good ultra wide angle cameras. But the one good thing that I like about the iQOO Neo10R's ultra wide is that at least it maintains the color science with the primary camera, which I cannot say about the P3 Ultra. Now when you're shooting low light pictures with the primary camera, we feel like both the phones do very similarly. But again, the problem with the P3 Ultra is that when you look at the close crop, you will realize that it tends to over sharpen everything just to compensate for the lack of details, and it looks very odd. We also shot some selfies, and I think both the photos don't look very good. Basically, Realme makes the skin reddish, whereas iQOO tends to overexpose it. But when you're talking about HDR selfies, like against the light, then iQOO Neo10R definitely takes better HDR selfies than P3 Ultra, which has a lot of bloom around the face. Even in selfie portraits, the iQOO Neo10R does a better job with good semantic segmentation and blur as well. However, in low light, we felt like the P3 Ultra actually had a better selfie performance compared to the iQOO Neo10R. Now, when it comes to video recording, both these phones can shoot at 4K 60 FPS from the primary cameras, but we felt like the iQOO Neo10R was better because you do get more details, and while the stabilization is not the best, it's still slightly better than the P3 Ultra. And the same is the case with low light video recording. I think iQOO does it better than Realme. Now, if you want to shoot ultra wide angle videos, then the 8 megapixel camera is not going to be that great because all you can do is 1080p 30 FPS video recording from both the phones. But one area where iQOO beats Realme is definitely in video recording with the selfie camera, because you get the option to shoot at 4K 30 FPS. And the P3 Ultra can do 1080p 60 FPS at best. Now the question here is, what would you prefer? Would you prefer a good 1080p 60 FPS stabilized footage or higher resolution 4K 30 FPS footage? Frame rates or resolution? Let me know in the comments. Now overall, if you look at it, if I had to pick one of these phones for good camera performance, then I would go with the iQOO Neo10R over the P3 Ultra. Alright, now time to talk about the software. Realme is running Realme UI 6 based on Android 15, and iQOO is running FunTouchOS 15 based on Android 15. But the advantage on iQOO is that you get 1 extra year of software support. So iQOO is promising 3+4 years of software updates, where Realme is promising 2+3. But if you look at it overall, I prefer Realme UI 6 experience over FunTouchOS 15. Now I'm not getting into the details, but the gist is that Realme UI 6 is very similar to OxygenOS 15, is very similar to ColorOS 15. So basically you get much faster parallel animations in Realme UI 6. You also get modern UI elements like the Flux themes and live activities, all of which are not available on FunTouch. FunTouch also has a lot of features and a bunch of AI features as well, but Realme also has all of these same AI features and all of the same overall other features, like for example split screen, or the fact that you can clone apps or record audio calls. All of that is possible on both the phones. But overall, if you look at it, I prefer Realme UI 6 over FunTouchOS 15. Alright, now let me just break down the pros of each of these phones before I, judge one of these as the winner under Rs 25,000. So the P3 Ultra has better design. It's slimmer, it's lighter, and has a gorgeous quad curved display. It also offers a software experience that is more in line with a modern design language, which is something that I prefer. Plus, the performance is good enough, especially considering the price. And the price is where Realme has pulled a coup. The 128GB variant of the phone, along with discounts, is available for I think 24,000 rupees, and with extra cashback and everything with your phone, you can get it for 23,000 rupees. But yeah, 24,000 rupees is very good price for this. iQOO is also priced similarly. It's about 1,000 rupees more. It's 25,000 rupees for the same variant, 128GB variant with UFS 3.1 storage. But iQOO has functional advantages. Firstly, you get even better performance. You get slightly better battery life, a superior display quality, but more importantly, cameras that are tuned well and can take decent pictures. So now that I have laid it out for you, tell me which one would you pick, because I am finding it really difficult to pick one, because with Realme you can save some money, and with iQOO you can probably get a little bit extra for the extra that you pay for it. So that was our comparison of the iQOO Neo10R against the P3 Ultra. Hope you guys liked it. If you did, give us a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Until then, keep tracking and stay safe.